Welcome to the Inside Track, your exclusive all-access pass to hear from global leaders who are putting talent transformation at the heart of their business. Fresh perspectives, bold ideas, global impact. All now on the Inside Track.
Hello and welcome to the Inside Track. I'm your host, Steve Bianchi. I'm the Chief People Officer of Beamery. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Paul Lesser, former Head of Talent Acquisition for Fidelity Investments and industry veteran. Paul joined Fidelity Investments at the age of 30, and he's estimated that he and his teams have recruited over 40,000 employees over the years. Paul's a family man, lives in the Boston area, enjoys sports and golf. And Paul, welcome to the podcast. We're really thrilled to have you here today.
Great to be here, Steve. Thanks for asking me to join you.
We'd like to start these podcasts off, Paul, by starting with some rapid fire questions.
Let's go. All right.
Great. Perfect. All right. So what is your favorite place in the world to visit, Paul?
Favorite place. I really always enjoyed visiting Bangalore in India and Hong Kong. Those are two of my favorite cities.
Do you prefer Android or iOS?
I am an iOS person.
All right. Apple fanboy?
Yes. All products.
Right on. What was the last app you downloaded on your phone or on your tablet then?
Last app was the Ring doorbell. It's a video doorbell that I still can't quite get it to work, but I did download it recently.
Right. But we won't hold that against iOS, right? It's got to be those Ring people. Okay. And what was the last book or article that you read that actually affected you in some way?
I read a number of the articles of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, and I thought that there was some pretty powerful learnings in those articles. I probably read too much on it, I'd say.
I mean, you've come across a lot of different leaders over the years, I'm sure. Who's a leader, whether somebody you know or somebody that, inspires you, but somebody that you actually admire as a leader?
I have to say, I really admire Tim Cook. I think he came into an unbelievably difficult situation following Steve Jobs. There was a lot of negativity on him in the press because he was basically a supply chain guy and Jobs was the innovation guy. And if you look and see what Cook has done in his tenure, it is absolutely amazing that he's kept the innovation, but the scale and ability to grow the company has just been phenomenal. So he's really someone I would admire.
I recognize, Paul, that my quick introduction in no way did you as a professional any kind of benefit there. So I think I can't adequately do you any justice by me trying to put words in your mouth. Would you mind maybe just giving people a summary of your kind of experience and various contributions you made to talent acquisition over the years?
Sure. I started as a recruiter out of college. So that was my first job, working in an employment agency and doing the job of a recruiter. I was very fortunate that one of my clients was Fidelity Investments, and they asked me to join them, which was 26 years ago. But my role was recruiting for customer service reps and really began to, I would say, experience what was a tremendous growth of a phenomenal company, and feel really fortunate. I had a variety of opportunities at the company where I developed initially through the talent acquisition organization, made the decision to then go into the human resource side of the business. So move into the line where I was very fortunate to have executive roles, both in technology, got some great global experience there, also in the investment side. And worked with some really phenomenal leaders. My last role in the company, really coming up on 4 years ago, was the head of talent acquisition, talent development, and learning, where I headed up the organization. And again, through some tremendous growth and some big changes that I'd been out of the recruiting space for a while because I'd been in the line for about 15 or so years, and just saw some real big changes in the industry and in the processes that were taking place to acquire great talent.
You saw such enormous growth at Fidelity, growing that headcount by around 10,000 employees in 10 years. I mean, how have you experienced kind of priorities and key themes evolving in this space?
I mean, I think that there's been a tremendous amount of change that you've needed to support the business. And a lot of it starts with the technology and the number of tools that are out there, not just to source people, but then to leverage, emerging technologies like data science and artificial intelligence to really help you go through and source in a different way to meet the needs of your business. I think that it was really important that people began to understand in the business that recruiting has turned into a real team sport. It can't just be, I rely on my recruiters to find me talent. It's got to be a partnership between the recruiters and the business to really create a really good candidate experience, because candidates have a lot of options. So when it comes to scheduling, when it comes to communication and feedback, when it comes to them getting their offers, when it comes to them actually accepting and coming on board, it's all part of that experience that's really critical. And that's changed a lot through the years. And I think effective companies right now are really thinking through that entire talent ecosystem of not just how do we attract people, but more importantly, how do we engage them? How do we bring them into the organization? And ultimately, if we get them hired, how do we make them as productive as possible from day one?
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that the word kind of talent encompasses a much, much broader sphere and ecosystem now in the footprint of the company. I mean, thinking back to those days of, recruiters as order takers almost, and now it's, like you said, much more around partnership. Can you maybe give our audience a little bit of some examples maybe around specifically how some of this has changed the role of a recruiter into something around balancing kind of that transactional element in terms of hire somebody, people in chairs, versus that role of being more transformational and partnering with the business and thinking about talent as an asset?
Sure. Recruiting is a difficult role. And I think in most cases, recruiters tend to be salespeople at heart. But what's happened is, particularly with technology, is that recruiters are being asked to really understand, whether it be their ATS, whether it be other sourcing mechanisms, to be able to go in and find candidates. But then more importantly, create a documentation process, create a process where you're able to start to really understand the data of where you are sourcing from, how you're doing getting people through the process. And it can only be done if people follow that process. So I think a really big change for the recruiters has been having to get comfortable with the technology. I think the second piece has been the recruiter really has to partner with the manager to think differently about the profiles and to think differently about the types of skills. Years of experience, in my opinion, is obsolete, especially if you're recruiting for technology capability, because you're looking for people that have had different experiences versus, years ago, it's, 8 to 10 years of experience. I won't look at the person. Now you might look at the person if they've, 2 years out of college, but you look at the level of, engineering expertise they've had, leveraging, could be cloud tools or it could be various software engineering tools. So I think that's pretty significant. The other big change I think has been is that the recruitment process has become a team sport. The recruiters have to work with the managers, I think, really closely to talk about what is the experience going to be when we bring people in. How are we going to interview them? Okay. How do we ensure that we're not bringing them back in multiple times because A, you're wasting the candidate's time, and B, you have to move quickly on great talent. And if you're not going to move quickly, you're going to lose them. So what is your process for really thinking through, a really good experience for the managers? How do you really think about the fact that the manager, in most cases, I think years ago, was always evaluating that talent? I don't think we're ever going to move away from the talent evaluation process. However, managers need to realize they also have to sell. It's out there about the environment and the culture that they're creating. So managers need to be very open about the type of team that they have, about the way that they look to develop associates. I think they have to really instill the overall culture of the firm. I mean, so much has changed where, candidates are evaluating companies on, am I going to have flexibility personally? Am I going to be able to, what's the environment? Is it 100% out of the office? Is it a hybrid? What does that mean for me? They're going to want to know, do companies have social responsibility? And the world's becoming smaller for candidates. And I think in many cases, it's creating a situation where the best companies right now have a really well-defined process of the sourcing, the ability to interview, and then more importantly, the ability to market their firm.
No, I think that's great, Paul. And you touched on something as well. I think that a lot of people just overlook. And that's when you talked about manager experience, and you can also then think about what is the recruiter's experience as well as the candidate's experience. Because At the end of the day, managers and recruiters are employees too. And like you said, they do have options. And I've seen a lot of talent acquisition professionals really focus on candidate experience, but then forget that the managers and the recruiters are part of their team as well, and don't track that. I think that's a real key message to kind of share with people. Yeah, really good points. And it really sounds like what you're saying, though, is that businesses really need to change the way that they identify, attract, entice candidates with their proposition, so that sell piece. And they really need to evolve what types of skills they use and how they interact. How do you see companies approaching this? And what are the primary challenges to kind of modernize a company in a world where candidates have options, like you said?
Recruiters have to really understand the jobs. And what I mean by that is, if you've got candidates that are interested, they're going to ask a lot of questions. And let me get back to answer is it's not going to work. So the recruiters really need to spend the time with the managers to really understand the skills that are necessary, the projects that they're looking for this person to execute on. What is the career pathing and career development? And more importantly, what's the best type of cultural fit that they see that they want to add to the team, so that the recruiter can really give the candidates a full overall view of what it would look like to join the firm. And building on that, as I mentioned earlier, the overall organizational culture, not just that divisional or that department culture, but that organizational culture. I think the other piece is that, recognizing, and I think you touched upon it a little bit, Steve, is this whole employee value proposition. Candidates have a lot of options. So what is the opportunity and the value for me to come to your firm? And, I think compensation is obviously always at the forefront for people, but then there's a variety of factors, and we touched upon some of those. But I think people really looking at overall benefit plans that are going to, provide them and their family with what they need in times like we have now. When you think about it, some of the top companies have really gone out there and made significant changes to their plans based on what happened with COVID, in terms of whether that be family support or caregiving and things of that nature.
It's becoming increasingly important when a company has a value proposition. They can't just state it. They have to prove it. They have to take internal moments of high engagement and then broadcast that out as like an evidence-based EVP model. And I think we're increasingly seeing this. So it's not just saying that you stand for something, it's actually proving that you do something around that.
Absolutely. I mean, actions speak louder than words, and more than ever, people are watching. And your associates are watching, your candidates are watching. And the way social media is now, it's quite public. So as a company, if you're going out there and saying how committed you are to DE&I as an example, well, you can say you're committed, but okay, so what are the programs you have to not just attract, but also to develop associates? What does your management team look like?
Yeah, no, I think we're full alignment on that. I think too that sometimes to encourage the organization to do the right thing and to make sure that those actions are truly embedded in the behaviors of the company, sometimes it makes sense to actually look at the way that the roles and the jobs themselves are designed to bake some of this stuff right in there. And then on top of that, like you mentioned with COVID and whatnot, we're seeing different companies going remote and flexible and hybrid working patterns. What are your thoughts when it comes to like the future of job design or role design and mixed workplaces and EVP and packaging all that into something that an organization can actually work with?
Steve, I think leadership really sets the tone for this. Okay. And when we talk about, thinking about different types of profiles, and I mentioned earlier, like diversity as an example, skills versus years of experience. The thing you're talking about when you think about, actions speaking louder than words and how do you really sustain changes in job flow or job descriptions and people, it really comes from leadership setting that tone and then including it in all aspects of your talent strategy, not just the recruitment, but also how you think about development, how you think about who you're putting on the best projects. A lot of companies, they put the same people on them, okay? And that doesn't really help you develop talent, but it also creates an environment where individuals are like, okay, how do I get noticed? So I think companies have to really work hard to create, an environment where there can be opportunities for people to raise their hand and get exposure.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And like you said, it's really it's the action. It's creating the opportunities, and it's proving that it's real. And it's probably a lot of internal communications, I would imagine, to remind people of the opportunities, but also, what's successful and what the company's trying to change and improve.
I would agree. I think that in a lot of cases, companies will look to say, we need to, and we always need to be looking out for great talent. Okay. But I think what's changed so much is companies recognizing you work so hard to get this talent. Now, how do you ensure that you retain it? How do you ensure that you're creating developmental experiences for leaders to get better, for people to become managers and become good managers, for people that don't want to be managers, but they are thought leaders? How do you create those types of environments? So I think that the overall, challenge of finding great people has created, in most cases, companies to recognize, okay, now that we've found them, how do we ensure that we keep them? And it's not just compensation, it's not just promotion. It's really a variety of other aspects to really engage them and have them be part of the organization.
No, I agree. And I'm sure that you've probably seen this throughout your career, as I have, that priorities for your talent kind of shift over time with generations, with different influences. I remember speaking to a learning and development professional that told me that they've shifted the model that they create curriculum, like courses now, to be no longer than 22 minutes, because that's the average length of a Netflix show. And you lose people's attention now because they're so used to, TikTok and YouTube and Netflix, shorter content. I think sometimes people fail to appreciate that there's a lot more inputs that go into these roles. Recruiting isn't just picking up a phone and sitting there with the white pages in the old days, right?
Absolutely. And you talk about learning. I mean, let's be frank. I think that people want to learn. In many cases, I think, to your point, they want to learn on their time also, and they're willing to do that. So having those tools and those platforms to be able to have people learn that maybe they've been in operations or sales, but they are wondering, like, why does this company, what is going to the cloud? Why is that so important? So they want to learn something about that. And why is it important to a company? And I think as part of the overall recruitment process, I think when you can share with people that that's part of the culture and the types of opportunities to have a continuous learning experience, I think that's really powerful for people. And in many cases, to your point, they can do it on their time. And let's face it, there's some great tools out there for people to get exposure to a variety of learnings. But at the same point, it creates a culture where people realize, I'm not just taking this job, but I'm joining a company that's going to, help me build up my skills and my knowledge that is only going to make me more marketable. And let's face it, a lot of candidates are thinking that when they're taking a job, how is this helping me long term? So I think those are important aspects as well to be thinking about.
No, absolutely. Right now in the press, we're hearing a lot about, attrition and the great employee migration and, and there's different kind of philosophies and views on what's the, what people are trying to optimize for. How much do you think kind of some of the stuff that we've spoken about already really plays into, like, do you think companies can retain people? Do you think it's just a wave of pent up time for change? What's kind of your take on it? Someone who's actually seen trends come and go over the years.
I think we're at a really interesting time right now, particularly because of the uncertainty in many cases about the return to work environment. And, you've had some companies that have come out and said, everybody's coming back 5 days a week. You've had some companies come out and say, no one's coming back. We're always going to be remote. Others coming back saying it's going to be hybrid. And in many cases, companies, have been playing it by ear because we've had so many, starts and stops with what's gone on with the pandemic. I think that's creating a pretty significant, change in the market. On top of that, you've got now companies that for the last 18 plus months have been able to work remotely. So in some cases, it's completely changed the landscape for talent where they've realized, hey, I can go and hire people now anywhere. We don't need people to come into our office. I think it's real, Steve. I think that the attrition challenges are real. I think you've also have associates that are going through, like a lot of people, this burnout of working from home. It's very hard to draw the line for when you start work and when you stop work, because you're at home. And in many cases, I think managers have struggled with drawing that line also. It used to be you could say, okay, I've got an hour and a half commute. I need to leave by 5, or I've got to catch this bus or this train. You don't have that anymore. So I think in many cases, businesses have been able to get more out of people. And I think there's a lot of burnout. I also think, though, let's face it, people have dealt with, significant personal challenges the last 18 months, whether that be individuals that have, suffered themselves or with family members with COVID, or, individuals that have had to, work with children being homeschooled, parents that couldn't leave the house. So I think that we're going through a pretty, intensive time right now where there's a lot of people reevaluating their personal situations. Work obviously is a big part of that individual as a person, but how do they ultimately make some changes in their lives? So I think companies have to be aware that this is going to continue to shift for a while. And I think that you've got to really be very fluid in terms of listening and understanding what's happening with your associates, because they certainly are not shy about sharing their views.
No, I fully agree. I think now is one of those times or points in times where, 2 years from now, we're going to look back and see how much has changed because of decisions that people took today, tomorrow, So, Paul, this has been really, really great, and it's a valuable information to our audience. So thank you very much. I'd like to close with one final question, please, which is, given the experience that you've gained over your career, what advice would you give your younger self if you were just embarking on that journey today?
It's a great question, Steve. I think that listening and being a more active listener is something I've always tried to get better at. I would say early in my career, I was more anxious to get my opinion out there. And I'd say through the years, I've learned that by being a better listener, you can, engage more with your team, with your peers. You'll learn more, and more importantly, it gives you time to think. So I would say that's advice that I would give my younger self and my current self.
That's great. Sound advice, Paul. And I'm sure a lot of people are very interested in other advice you might be able to offer them. Where can people find you should they want to look you up?
Well, I'm active on LinkedIn, so at Paul Lesser on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out. I'm very active on that social media. So look forward to hearing from members of this community.
And with that, that's a wrap of this episode of The Inside Track. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more insightful conversations. We hope to see you soon. Thanks again.